Good morning, everybody. It's Jesse, and I'm back again for another installment of Social School, and here to talk about a topic that everybody is very familiar with. Today, we're going to talk about stress and stress management. And so, usually, a good place to start with this is let's kind of think about or come up with a definition. Um, I looked at Google, and what Google told me is that stress is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. And I think that we can all agree that pretty much the whole country, if not the whole world, right now is dealing with some very demanding circumstances. And we all have our own definitions of what stress is and what it means to us. Um, but the thing that I want for us to kind of start off with today is thinking about how stress is not always negative. The connotation that people have when they hear, "Oh man, I'm stressed," or "This is so stressful," is that it is always a bad thing. But if we can somehow take that and flip it or think about it in a different way, then we have an opportunity maybe to deal with it in a positive way. And so there's a term that I think that everybody should maybe be familiar with, and I don't know how long it's been since you've had a health class or something along those lines, but there's actually a word that means positive stress, and it's eustress, eustress, eustress. And what I like about this word is that it tells us that there is such a thing as positive stress and that stress is not always negative. And if you think about it, there have probably been times in your life where you were stressed, but you were able to use that stress in a positive way. Maybe you were stressed about a test, and so you studied extra. Or for me personally, I got to tell you, I was stressed about, making these videos. Or maybe you were stressed about a job interview or starting a new job, starting at a new school, and that stress kind of helped you to prepare or use that stress and kind of turn it into an excitement or an enthusiasm. And so we just have to recognize that stress is not always negative, it's not always to be avoided. The truth of the matter is that a life without stress would involve you just sitting on the couch 24/7, not growing, not learning, not taking on any challenges. And so stress is not always negative. And we have to be open to the idea that, some stress is good. Some stress is good. It can motivate us, it can help us move forward, and like I said, it can help us to grow and learn. And so some of you are probably thinking, yeah, but my stress is just way too much. You know what I mean? That stress level is just so high that I'm shutting down or I'm acting out. Some of us are getting in trouble or not getting our stuff done. And so, even though stress can be positive, we need a model that's going to help us to deal with it in a more productive way. And so what I have done is I've kind of put together a system of stress management that I want to share with you. And what we're going to look at today is a very, very basic model of stress and stress management that's going to help us to identify what are the causes of stress, how does it affect us, and what we do with it, and what we do about it. And so this model that I use, I have seen for a long time, and I've used it in a lot of different settings. When I worked at the alternative school, I was not only the anger management specialist, but I was the violence prevention coordinator. So for the most part, it was my job to help wannabe gangbangers to not beat the crap out of each other. And I first saw this model there. But then later, when I worked at the Lighthouse Drug Treatment Center, they also talked about this same model, and it's going to address triggers, cues, and reducers. Excuse me. And this model is very effective in helping us to become more aware of, again, what our stressors are, how it affects us on the inside, and then gives us a game plan for what we do with it. And then lastly, when I did my master's degree in special education and social emotional learning, I saw that model again. So I think that what we're looking at here is a very, very basic system that's going to help us to better deal with or manage our stress. And so there are three key terms, again, that I think that we really need to look at and break down if we are eventually going to be able to manage our stress. And so here we go, just a very, very simple model. 3 key terms that are definitely worth understanding: triggers, cues, reducers. It starts with triggers, and this is a word that you are all probably very familiar with. It says that your triggers are things outside of us that lead us to feel strong or difficult emotions. And like I said, you're probably all very familiar with the phrase or the word triggered. I was triggered, felt triggered. And I think for the most part, when people think about this word, they think of it in terms of dealing with anger. But it is not always just anger that is the cause of our stress. The big 3 of difficult feelings are mad, sad, and scared, and some version of those feelings are usually what is, the cause of our stress. Notice here that it does not say that a trigger is the thing that causes your feelings. What it does is it kind of points us in that direction. And at this point, I need to point out that, triggers are different for different people. Some people might be triggered by name calling. Some people might be triggered by getting into trouble, or, for me personally, one of my biggest triggers is when someone lies to me. And I'm not talking about the kind of lie where someone tells me that, they drive a Ferrari or they're dating a supermodel, because usually I think that's kind of funny. For me, one of my biggest triggers is when someone tells me that they're going to do something and then they don't do it. And so as we look at this term triggers, the reason why it is so important for us to be able to identify our triggers is so that we kind of know in advance what's going to set us off, what might make us lose it. We need to know those things that are going to, kind of point us in that direction. And the way that I like to prove to people, that it's not the trigger that makes you mad is, again, that same concept that the same thing can happen to 2 totally different people, and one person will react in a very negative way and the other person will handle it. I know personally for me, being cussed at is no big deal. I have been cursed out so many times in my life that, for me, to have somebody cuss at me, usually what it ends up making me do is kind of laugh, and I just laugh it off. But for other people, being called names, those are fighting words. And so we know that it's not the things that happen to us that cause our feelings, but rather how we react to them. And so when you're aware of your triggers, then you can know, hey, you know what, I'm triggered right now. Maybe I need to take a break. Something's going on with me, and I need to kind of stop myself or pay attention to that trigger so that I don't act out in a way that's going to get me in trouble or have me do something that I regret. The next key term that we need to look at are cues. And if you've ever been in a play before, or if you know what a cue card is, cues are something that kind of tell you what to do. And if you think about your brain as kind of like the director of your play of life, if you pay attention to your cues, what's going on inside of you that let you know that you're dealing with or feeling strong emotions, then you kind of know how to act and how to react. And so again, the definition says things that happen inside of us that let us know we are feeling strong emotions. And these cues are different for different people. And so you have to pay attention or be aware of them if you're going to use them. The point of a cue is to help us to intervene before things get out of control. I know that for me personally, my anger sometimes is like a fire inside of me. And if I can catch that fire at the campfire level, then I might have a chance of putting it out. Because once it turns into a brush fire, a house fire, eventually it turns into a forest fire, there is no way that I'm going to be able to deal with this stress effectively. And so if you look at the examples, it says tense muscles, right? So for some of us, when we're anxious, we get very tense. You might get a headache or a stomach ache. For a lot of us, when we're angry, we might clench our fists. Or for me, I got to tell you, one of my biggest cues that lets me know that I'm dealing with frustration is I will growl, right? Arr! And so just like an angry bear, when I am triggered, I will growl, or I'll make some noises, or I'll even talk through my teeth. God damn it! I swear to God, and I sound like an absolute fool when I do that. And so when I find myself doing those behaviors, or maybe sometimes it's even thinking those difficult thoughts, I know that I'm triggered. And that's really what this is about. And the reason why this is important is that for a lot of us, we're not really aware of our cues. I ask clients and students, well, how did you know that you were triggered? And they will say to me, well, I just was. And the thing is, if you wait until, things are at that forest fire level or you're out of control, then it's very, very difficult to manage that stress. And so you have to take a minute and kind of pay attention to what's going on inside of you. Is your heart racing? Maybe you're breathing a little bit differently than you are. If you've ever had a panic attack before, you know that there are some physical symptoms with that. And these things are definitely worth paying attention to. And we want to pay attention to what's going on inside of our body, inside of our minds, if we ever are going to be able to manage that stress. All right. So the point of all of this is, how do we get to our reducers, right? And it says things we can do to help us deal with or handle strong or difficult emotions. And just like the word says, right, the goal of a reducer is to help us to reduce our stress. When things get out of hand, when things are too much, if you have anger management issues and you're at that forest fire level, what can I do that's going to bring me down, that's going to, help me to get through this, to take that test or do that job interview, deal with that difficult customer, right? So I've acknowledged my triggers. I can feel that I'm triggered because I've got those cues going, and now it's time for me to move into the reducers. And again, these are things we can do to help us deal with or handle strong or difficult emotions. And for everybody, these reducers are going to be different. Not the same exact, reducer is going to work for every single person. And so you have to be self-aware of what reducers work for you. And if you look at my examples, my number one example here is deep breathing, right? And so I know that when I am triggered, if I get into an argument with my wife and somewhere in my head I'm thinking about calling her all kinds of names, I know that what I need to do instead is I need to just relax and take a deep breath, right? So, and just take that deep breath. And sometimes deep breathing is not enough. And what I need to do is I need to walk away from a situation. In the examples, it says, take a walk, or sometimes you can go to your happy place. For some of us, if we're feeling sad, maybe being able to talk to a friend. For a lot of people, playing video games and just blowing the absolute crap out of somebody is how we, blow off some steam or deal with that negative emotion. But you have to know what reducers are going to work for you, right? What is it that is going to help you to reduce or handle those difficult emotions? And here, we're not trying to solve all of your problems. We're not trying to, fix the situation. What we really want to do is we want to come to a place where we can just bring our stress level down. And again, you have to really, really pay attention to what's going to work for you. And if you know in advance, hey, if I just take some deep breaths, I'll be able to work through this. Or if I can just take 10, right? And that's what breaks are for. And I have some people who have, in workplace situations, had to just, walk away, take a break. They let their manager know, hey, I just need to take 5 so I don't just absolutely flip out on this person. But if you can get to those reducers before you act out, before you break down, before things, really, really get out of hand, then that's what this model is for. And so as we look at, this whole big model, this is what it's really about. And there's all different kinds of reducers that you can do. Some reducers you can do in advance, right? So there are some people who do yoga, or they exercise, or they eat right, they make sure they get a good night's sleep, and all of those things count as reducers as well. And there it is. That is probably one of the most basic stress management models that there is. It is a very effective way to begin this conversation of how do we manage stress, how do we deal with it. And so as you find yourself dealing with stress in the coming weeks and days, I want you to think again about your triggers, cues, and reducers. And if we start to pay attention to these things, we might be able to better manage or deal with our stress. And so I know that for every single one of us, stress has been through the roof. That's why there are so many stress memes. And if you're feeling anything like that little mouse at the beginning of this video, and you're feeling a little stressed, then it's time to start taking a look at that and dealing with it. Because when we let our stress go, or we let it get out of hand, then that's when things get really, really, really messy. I like to think of stress as kind of like when you take a soda bottle. If you've ever done that before, you take a soda bottle and you shake it, and you shake it, and you shake it. And once you try to take the lid off of that soda, it just explodes all over everywhere, and there's a great big mess. And so we want to avoid that, right? And one simple solution I'm going to leave you with today that I always find really, really handy is just to talk to somebody about your stress. And for a lot of us, we don't like to talk about it. But I think that being able to talk about your stress is kind of like taking that soda bottle, and if you've ever played that game before where you just crack the lid just a little bit, just crack it just a tiny little bit, and you let off some of that steam, and then you seal it back up, that's kind of what talking about our stress can do for you. And so if you have the opportunity to, when you're stressed, just kind of get it off your chest, to vent or do whatever you've got to do. If you've got some people in your life who are willing to listen to you, then that's a really, really good thing. And I will tell you, if you're one of those people who don't have anybody to talk to, that's kind of where I come in. And so I am going to include my phone number and my email address. Your teachers also have access to this. But if you ever want somebody to talk to about your stress that's not involved, it's a good idea to reach out. It's a good idea to talk to somebody. So thank you everybody for your time. I hope you appreciated this video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.